Most of you have heard the terms baby boomer, Generation X, and Generation Y. Have you ever thought about why these groups of people were labeled with these different names? Today I'm going to describe the differences between the generations, between the baby boomers, the Generation X, and the Generation Y. There are differences in the ways that we think, the things that we believe in, and our values. Let's start with the baby boomers. Now, these were the people that were born between 1946 and 1964. Okay? As of 2006, baby boomers made up about 26% of the U.S. population. They, according to e-Sign articles, they're known as people that are set in their ways. They're often unchangeable, and they can tend to be kind of arrogant and seem kind of selfish. They do have positive attitudes, though, however. Okay. Another drawback for the baby boomers is they tend to focus a lot on the lives of their children, and often, because of that, they become controlling parents. Okay. They grew up in a post-war era when things were rapidly changing after World War II, and some popular things that came about in the era of the baby boomers were aerosol spray cans, so like the Aquanet hairspray, Silly Putty, and the Slinky. Elvis was a popular musical influence to the baby boomers, as well as Chuck Berry and Frankie Avalon. Hula hoops were a fad back in the baby boomer era. Telephone cramming was a popular thing back then, and whenever they went out to dances on Friday and Saturday nights, they often wore plaid skirts, patent leather shoes, and when they were at home on the weekends, they often watched I Love Lucy, Dragnet, and the Honeymooners. Okay. The next group of people that I want to talk about is the Generation X. Now, these are the people that were born between 1965 and 1980, and today these people are aged 32 to 47. Okay. The Generation X tend to have a more cynical view of the world compared to their parents and grandparents that came from the baby boomer generation. Generation X, they grew up in a time when the world was changing. Drugs were a big problem at the beginning of that generation. Diseases that we had never seen before had come out, such as HIV, and there was also economic hardship during their time. They're often stereotyped as slackers, although that is generally not true, but that's how they are often seen by the rest of the population. The Generation X group is more involved civically than almost any other group. They are the second largest group of people in the United States that vote, that donate their time and their money, and they also are the second largest group to volunteer. Some fads and fashions and the arts also changed when it came to the Generation X. Elton John was a musical influence to this generation, as was Fleetwood Mac and also the Bee Gees. The Brady Bunch was a show that was watched by Generation X, and actually I think that show is still in syndication today, so even the Generation Ys are watching the Brady Bunch. Another popular show, according to ClassicTV.com, was Bewitched. And Battleship and the Etch-a-Sketch were very popular games in the Generation X era. Now, according to About.com, some things that were invented during the Generation X era were VCRs, contact lenses, and floppy disks. Okay. Moving on to the Generation Y. This is the group of people that were born between 1981 and 2002. Okay. Today their ages range between 10 and 31. Okay. They're often known as the boomerang generation, and according to eHow.com, the article stated that they are known as the boomerang generation because they are often take slower to leave home, and they take a much more considerable amount of time to pick a mate and a career. Okay. These people in the Generation Y are often seen as attention craving, They tend to question authority a lot. They speak their minds, and also they're culturally tolerant, and they're also very accepting of alternative lifestyles, which is a far stretch at the other end of the spectrum from their parents that were the baby boomers. Okay. The music that Generation Y danced to would have been Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Britney Spears. Okay. To be in fashion for the Generation Y, you had to have on your Guess jeans, your socks had to be layered, and you had your big oversized shirt, and the collar always had to be flipped up. That was an absolute mess. Okay. Popular shows that were on during Generation Y's time were Cosby Show and Roseanne. Some popular inventions for this group of people, the Generation Ys, were DVDs, iPods, and of course the ever-popular YouTube. So looking back through the generations, we have the baby boomers, the Generation X, and the Generation Y. The Generation Y is a far cry from Generation X. Fashion is different. Music is different. Television shows are different. Thoughts, beliefs, and values have differed greatly throughout this span of time. It is nice to know where we are now, but it's also important to look at where we came from and what we have been through as the generations progress. So as we travel through time, it is clear that some generations are not so accepting of the changes that have occurred, while others have embraced it and have moved forward. But once again, it is important to take a look back, and it's also fun just to look back at the things of the past and where we are today.